Hello, everyone. I'm Lucy. I will be your host today. I am the COO at Stripe. We are employee engagement survey software. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you about today's topic of why your staff surveys aren't moving the needle on employee engagement. But before we begin, I just wanted to go over a couple of little things. First off, there's a Q&A box. You should see it. If you look at the bottom of your window, there will be a toolbar there. Please make sure you use it. Get your questions in nice and early if you have any. It doesn't necessarily need to be completely tied to the topic that we're covering today. If there's anything to do with staff surveys that you would like me to try and answer your question on, I can do that. The reason to get your questions in early is just to make sure that people upvote your questions, so it gives people an opportunity to do that and make sure that your question is at the top and is of a priority. There is also a chat, like I've just mentioned, so it's there for you to connect, meet others, have different conversations. So please do introduce yourself, mention where you're from, what your role is, and yeah, make sure you have that opportunity to connect. And if there is anything that you want to speak about with me or the team afterwards, you can just drop me an email or a LinkedIn message. You can find me on Lucy Harvey on LinkedIn, and my email is lucy@stribehq.com. So I think everyone is in. I can see the numbers kind of stopped trickling up, so we will get going. So for those of you that don't know us, we are Stripe. We are focused on creating software that really works for your team and the unique environment that you operate in. So every employee, every team, and every organization is so different. And we recognize that you need pulse survey software that will support you through those changes with all of the different variations you have going on. We work with organisations such as the UK Space Agency, Newcastle United Football Foundation, and councils such as Bolton and Barking and Dagenham, and the NHS as well. So we are well versed in flexible pulse surveys for hugely distributed teams, and we work with companies of all sizes, from the big to the small and everything in between. We also have a fabulous team that work alongside you of people scientists to really craft everything from the way that you launch your surveys, and really helping you as well to craft the surveys that you need to send to help you achieve your goals. So that's just a tiny bit about us. I wanted to get that in nice and early. So we've got a real packed agenda today, and I've made sure to weave lots of actionable insights into every slide. So you'll take, hopefully, loads away that you can use to improve your surveys and really start moving the needle on employee engagement. For those that can't stick around for the full webinar, don't worry, we will be sending the recording out for you afterwards, so you'll be able to catch everything that we cover today. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the challenges to improving employee engagement, then having a look at those common barriers. What is it that's really stopping us from moving the needle on employee engagement? We're going to be looking at how you can overcome those barriers to engagement with surveys. And then I also just wanted to share some of the top hints and tips and things that we've picked up in our experience with working with customers over the last few years on how to successfully launch surveys so that they really do create change, and also things to keep in mind when running employee surveys. We've also got time, would you believe it, with all of that going on, for a Q&A at the end. So like I said, please do make sure you're getting your questions in early, or just feel free to pop me a LinkedIn message afterwards. That's totally okay too. So the challenges to improving employee engagement. Before I get into it, I always think it's worthwhile keeping in mind the challenges that we're working with on the topic that we're discussing today, especially when it comes to a far-reaching and complex topic like employee engagement. So just to remind you all why it's such an important topic, or to give you another stat that you can take to your senior leaders, because I'm hoping that you're all on board with this one already. Just 10% of UK employees feel engaged or thriving in the workplace, and that came from Gallup's recent 2023 report on the state of the global workplace. 65% of employees who feel their voice is heard are more likely to stay at their company, and companies with high employee engagement are 21% more profitable. They experience 41% lower absenteeism and have employees that are 18% more productive. All of this feels very pertinent today. 10% of UK employees feeling engaged or thriving is a huge statistic for us to be working with, and it can feel quite overwhelming at times. But then when you look at some of the tools that employers have at their disposal, such as surveys, which is what we're discussing today, only 31% of employers currently conduct effective employee surveys. So there's a huge amount of opportunity there for us to really make a difference for these employees. Highly engaged employees are 3 times more likely to say they feel heard at that workplace rather than their highly disengaged colleagues. There are so many different ways you can harness the power of employee voice for your employee engagement strategy, and I'm happy to talk about many other ideas that we have with you if you want to reach out to me afterwards. But pulse surveys or employee surveys are one of the best ways of capturing the voice of everyone within your organization. Feedback is always how we improve, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. So what are the common barriers to employee engagement? Firstly, more often than not, one of the barriers is having no clear vision for the organization itself. Employees who say their company's mission and vision align with their own are far more likely to recommend their employer as a great place to work. And this is a huge stat, 70% versus 25%. They're also more likely to say their work gives them a feeling of personal accomplishment, 72% versus 29%. And they're also less likely to say they're thinking about leaving their current employer, 33% versus the 44%. Yet only 28% of employees agree that the values and actions of their employer are aligned to their own. And without this shared sense of purpose or direction, it can be really hard for employees to understand and align their own goals within their role or within their life to those of the organization. This then leaves them feeling disengaged with work. And if they don't understand what they're contributing towards, why would they be investing their time and energy into it? Nearly half of employees in the US and the UK are currently considering leaving their company because it doesn't adequately exemplify the values that they personally hold. So this is a really, really big one when we're thinking about the common barriers to employee engagement. The next challenge and barrier that we often look at is having no clarity on role expectations. 48% of employees have left a job because it did not meet their expectations. When employees are unsure what tasks they should focus on, they can quickly become disengaged and frustrated, and balancing all of these competing demands and an unclear job role can make them feel really overwhelmed, anxious, and it leads to reduced productivity, increased absenteeism, and lowered morale as well. A poor onboarding process can often contribute to this lack of clarity as well, as new starters can feel lost and confused almost immediately, and it's really, really difficult to shake that once it's started. An amazing onboarding experience can improve employee retention by 82% and productivity by over 70%. So there's a lot there that we can have an impact with. Something to keep in mind when you're considering your next survey, for example, is if this is something you're concerned about, remember to think about that bigger picture too. It may not be dissatisfaction specific to a role itself. It may be that there's other factors contributing to this dissatisfaction and lack of clarity. So it might be the internal communications within your team or within the wider business, maybe the onboarding, like I've just mentioned. Management style can really play into this, and recruitment as well. Are you setting those expectations and that clarification early enough to recruit the right people into the role? So these are all things that you want to be thinking about when you're having a think about this barrier in conjunction with your surveys. Lack of development opportunities is another really big barrier for employees when it comes to employee engagement. 1 in 3 employees cite boredom as their main reason for leaving their role. That is the top reason within this survey as well. Largest salary only came 4th, with 19% choosing it versus the 33% that cited boredom as their main reason. Without access to training and other growth initiatives such as mentorship, coaching, e-learning, and other learning programs, employees can start to feel that their roles are stagnant and their potential for career advancement is really, really slim. This is really demotivating for employees, and it's really disheartening as well, and it can lead them to become really disengaged from their work. So surveys are one tool that you can use to really help you understand what's important to your employees in terms of this development piece, and create that tailored experience that matches their priorities, because surveys are an amazing tool to identify these problems, but they're also an amazing tool to help you create those curated and really personalized experiences that match that employee's needs. Next, there's a lack of resources necessary to work can really present a barrier for employee engagement as well. And this can include a range of different things, including a shortage of basic supplies, limited access to technology or systems needed to do their job properly, and even inadequate tools and infrastructure needed to perform at that higher level as well. It can also, other things that can come into it as well as things like the lack of HR to carry out certain tasks. So maybe they need a change to some policies, maybe they have questions they need answered, maybe they need some support sorting out their payroll. And this can often be kind of things. There's also other things as well, like a shortage of personnel or insufficient staffing levels as well. So it's a really, really far-reaching topic. If organizations are unable to provide the necessary resources for employees to work effectively, then they can also quickly become really frustrated and apathetic. Surveys are a really great way to identify the lack of resources and which teams are being affected and which resources that they need. One tip for this is just make sure you have free text questions available throughout your surveys. These are really great places to surface this kind of feedback, and it's often the place that employees will share solutions to. So more often than not, you may not actually be asking a question specific to this topic, but just making sure that you have those free text questions there really prompts employees to have a think about that in relation to other questions they're answering, and they will often offer a solution as well for you. Another barrier to employee engagement is having no sense of community, and this has become more and more of a concern since the pandemic, since we switched to more hybrid work styles, and belonging and a sense of community are really highly correlated to engagement as well. Only 20% of employees who feel they don't belong are engaged. So there's a real chunk of people, around 40%, that say that they feel isolated at work. So again, really big numbers we're talking about here. Belonging doesn't just help your employees meet their basic needs either. It inspires their work and helps create better engagement overall. Workplace belonging actually leads to a 56% increase in job performance. So again, really big numbers, really big topic. Employees should feel their colleagues, managers, and even upper management genuinely care about them and their work. If they don't, it can lead to feelings of isolation, disconnection, and obviously that low engagement level that we're talking about at the moment. This, like I said, is a really common barrier in a world where hybrid and work from home has become the norm. But again, surveys are a really great way to surface which teams and employees may be feeling this way, so you can understand the specific areas of the business that you can support with this. So this is something that, especially if you're a hybrid team, there may be some areas of the business that feel that sense of community. Perhaps they're in the office or in your facilities every day, and there's other areas of the team that perhaps never come in and meet the team. This is why with these segments and with this team specific issue, it's really important that you use survey software that helps maintain anonymity, but also allows you to segment into your data. This will help you target those particular areas that are feeling this and create those tailored solutions for them. Just a couple more barriers to go through before we get on to the next section of this. But another barrier is these minimal additional benefits or perks that employees are looking for support on these days. So 75% of employees are likely to stay with their employer because of their employee benefits package. Yet nearly 2 in every 5 employees believe their benefits don't adequately reduce their stress, which obviously leads to things like burnout, mental health concerns, and eventually that lower employee engagement index. Perks such as flexible working, free meals, and activities can all boost employee engagement, and they also create that sense of appreciation and recognition, which we know is so important amongst employees when it comes to employee engagement. There is a catch though. We need to make sure they're effective, and we also need to make sure that they make the most of your time and budget, are really conscious of the fact that you don't have a lot of time, and you may have a strict budget to work with as well. So how do we make sure that these resources are really meaningful and impactful for your employees, but are also conscious of those restrictions that you are perhaps operating with? Again, surveys, they're a great way to gather feedback on your current systems. They're a great way to understand what's missing, and they're a great way to gather ideas to fill those gaps as well. And I will be giving you some ideas for how you can do that later on in the presentation. But for surveys, if you don't have a lot of time and you're finding that you are working really hard on maintaining some of the benefits packages that you already have in place, surveys are a great way to review what's being accessed, what's being used, and what's really making a difference for employees. So you can adjust what you're offering, perhaps free up some time and budget for other things that employees will really value and will make a difference for them. Because one thing just to finish on with this slide is where we say minimal additional perks. Minimal to a lot of people can mean little or not very much, but actually it's looking more at what really is valued by employees. So minimal additional for one person may be different from another, which is why that tailored experience is very important. The final one is a big one that I think we've all felt and are more aware of over the last few years, which is no clear work-life balance. 87% of employees expect their employer to support them in some way with balancing work and personal commitments, but 39% of UK employees reported feeling exhausted in the last year, and 62% have reported still having those long working hours. As we all know, people need time outside of work to rest and recharge. If they don't, it leads to burnout, lack of engagement, and eventually that employee leaving because of burnout. So what does work-life balance look like for your employees? It's different for everyone. Everyone values different kind of aspects of it, but good support for work-life balance and burnout prevention is a lot more than just reminding your employees to take holiday and not to work in the evenings. Getting to the root cause of burnout and understanding what would support your employees to overcome it is key, and that's where surveys again can come in and help. So how do we take everything we've just learned about the barriers to employee engagement and use it to make sure that our next surveys begin moving the needle on employee engagement? So why surveys for a start? I think I've talked about them quite a lot, but it's worth just having a quick reminder on them. Our employee engagement strategy is a great way to give us guidance and set a plan so that we can improve. But the only way that you can be certain that your strategy will work for your people is to base it on feedback. So we do keep coming back to that feedback theme today. There are lots of different ways that you can harness the power of employee voice for your strategy, and surveys are just one of the best ways to do that. We've learned a lot over the past few years about how quickly our external environment can impact our employees' engagement. And because of their simplicity and size, surveys are a very quick and amazing way to create, approve, and launch. That sentence didn't make sense, sorry. Because of their simplicity and size, surveys are very quick to create, approve, and launch, which means that you can tackle kind of up and coming topics or issues that you're noticing in your employees very, very quickly before they become a bigger problem and really impact engagement. Surveys are also really quick and simple to answer from your employees' perspective, so they will always get a very, very good response rate. This means you can be confident in the data you're basing your strategy on, so that it really represents everyone and ultimately has that positive impact for everyone too. Choosing the right provider for this is really important. You want one that allows your employees to access the survey wherever they are. So if you have a dispersed or offline team, you need to make sure you're finding a provider with an app or offline methods of engagement so that you can truly capture everyone's voice. With certain survey platforms as well, you'll be able to see your results in real time. So whilst these results won't represent everyone, there is always a little bit of a trade-off to have. And if there is something in your world that you need to act fast on, having that ability to look at the real-time measurements is really, really crucial for your employees. The simplicity of pulse surveys as well means that they are relatively easy to analyze and draw insights from. Choosing the platform again will mean that you can avoid hours in spreadsheets, and most of the analysis should be done for you so that you can focus on coming up with those action plans, those post-survey comms, and all of the fun bits around creating change for employees that I know you really enjoy doing. So just to go back to the topic, which was how to overcome these barriers with employee surveys, the first step is just having a think about ways you can involve your leadership team, demonstrating leadership commitment by actively participating in survey initiatives and fostering that culture of openness and responsiveness will really create the change you need to help your employee engagement. There are loads of different ways you can do this. I've got a few that I will go through now. For example, just getting your CEO or senior leaders to send pre-survey communications, that really gives that vote of confidence that they are the ones that are listening to, and they are the ones that can create that action from the outcome of the survey. Having a survey kickoff event with senior leaders present is always really lovely to do as well. It turns the survey into a celebration. It gets that positive buy-in for employees, and having those senior leaders present really gives them that vote of confidence as well. Another really lovely idea for you to overcome this barrier is to conduct feedback forums led by leadership to discuss survey results. So really showing that the leadership are confident in communicating those results, they're happy to share them, and they're really happy to listen to feedback. I always like to see these coupled with a few different ways that employees can share feedback, because I know, and we've seen it with organisations we've worked with, that there are often employees that aren't confident speaking up in that public forum. So it's always a really lovely idea to have these feedback forums, but continually mention that there are other, perhaps anonymous messengers or email addresses that they can reach out to feed their ideas back into the feedback forum after the event so that no one's voice is left behind. You also want to make it clear in your post-survey communications and action planning that senior leaders are involved at every step. Again, this just gives that really lovely vote of confidence that you are committed to creating that change and you're committed to creating that culture of openness. Another one for maybe the internal comms teams, if you have one, is just to speak with managers and leaders and ask them to share any personal stories or case studies they may have related to the impact that the employee feedback has had. So once you're at that action planning stage and perhaps you're 1 or 2 surveys in and you've got more of that demonstrable evidence that the action planning and the employee feedback has really created change, managers and leaders sharing their own stories about how they've had an effect on them is a really lovely thing to do as well. Doing all of this overcomes one of the main barriers to employee engagement, which is having no clear vision for the organization as well. So make sure you take the time to create those connections during your communications too, between your vision and the action planning and your senior leaders. So if your leadership team are bought in and the communication and action plans are shaped around your values, your mission and your vision, employees will begin to understand the value of your organization and how they are lived out by your colleagues and your leadership team too. Another tip is just to make sure that you're defining the purpose of your survey. So creating a purpose for your survey will ensure that you keep stakeholders really aligned with it. You can gather those targeted insights that create tangible change, and it creates alignment on the issues that matter most to your employees as well. The purpose of your survey will be different for different surveys. It doesn't always need to be the same. It's just having that North Star to shoot for. For example, you may want to improve employee well-being. You may want to explore employee resilience, maybe evaluate the perceptions of your internal communications. I know we've talked about that one a lot today already, or review your remote working policies. For example, if you do want to review perhaps you're a tech company and you want to review the effectiveness of your internal communications channels. You may set aside a survey to do that, and the survey might reveal that your employees actually felt really disconnected from your leadership, coming back to that leadership piece again. And as a result, you may implement some of the things we just talked about there, maybe regular town hall meetings to discuss feedback, or perhaps a more robust internal communications policy. And platforms. So it's really, really key to have that purpose defined. One of the most important parts of employee engagement is these moments that matter and how a company treats their employees in those moments. For us, the moments that matter are the moments that impact an employee's organizational experience most significantly. This might be through their day, it might be through their year, or it might be through their career. These are also the times when it's especially important to engage employees. These might range from an employee's onboarding experience to how a company handles situations such as an employee having a baby, caring for a family member, or even a global event like a pandemic. Surveys can help you gather feedback on what's important for your employees in these moments. You can create them to specifically review these moments on a singular basis. Perhaps there is a new cafeteria in one of your facilities, and you want to understand how the impact of that has changed employees' perception of their working environment, for example. Or you could set up automated surveys that gather feedback throughout the employee lifecycle. For example, the recruitment experience, onboarding, promotions, and job role changes. Job role changes are a really key moments that matter for employees. Oftentimes the support can be quite varied in organizations when it comes to job role changes, and it's one that we see missed a lot in survey strategies, but can make a very big difference for employee engagement. Performance reviews, annual reviews, and exit surveys as well. So these are all kind of some of the life cycle moments that you can be thinking about setting up surveys for that will really help you gather more information, insights on your employee engagement. Have a think about, and this is just following on from what we've said, tailoring and targeting your surveys. So this is going to be a way to get those specific insights you need to create change that matters, but whilst retaining a real high degree of relevance for the employees you're sending the survey to. So one thing we need to make sure of is making sure that we ask surveys that are relevant to the employees that are receiving it, because it can damage your response rate, and it can also set up your surveys for failure too if employees aren't seeing action from those surveys. So this kind of thing, it can actually come back to one of the challenges we identified earlier around belonging and understanding which teams are or aren't feeling that. But it also can go a little bit further as well. So for example, once you've identified those certain groups, you may want to explore ways you can enhance the support you give to employees, for example, for working from home. But perhaps but you also can segment, employees who work in warehouses or factories or in manufacturing plants, for example. So it's really, really important that you have survey software that supports you to dig into these segments, so you can identify those groups and tailor and target specific actions to them. Another function when you have software that gives you the ability to tailor and target your surveys is you can actually customize your surveys to address specific engagement challenges within the teams. So, if we've perhaps identified that our working from home cohort does have an issue with belonging, and we want to dig into more about how we can provide support for them, what their needs are, and what actions we can create, we could target a specific survey to the folk that are working from home. We could gather ideas about the specific support they need and what the change those groups want to see. We could also then follow up with them once those changes have been put in place to see how that has created change for them over time. And we can do all of this without creating those false promises for other groups, because it can be restrictive when you have that dispersed workforce where some people can work from home and some people perhaps don't. We don't want to be setting up promises that we can't keep. Following on from that again, We want to make sure we're establishing those feedback loops, communicating your survey results and outlining your action plans. I have already mentioned this in most of the slides, but it 100% deserves its own slide because it's incredibly important. For example, if you've used survey data to identify that your employees need new learning and development opportunities, make sure you follow up in communications to confirm with your employees that that is the action that you're creating. And you could even use another survey to help you tailor and shape that idea into something your employees really value. You could use it to continue to evaluate the platform even after your launch. So your surveys can help you ensure that it's continuously adapting to the needs of employees. That's one thing that's so amazing about employee engagement and the way that we work in HR is that it's never a one and done thing. We have to keep evaluating, adjusting, and making sure that we're continually meeting the needs of our employees. This doesn't need to be complicated either, and it doesn't need to take a lot of energy, but ensuring that you follow a process, a strong process of surveying and communication will ensure that you move the needle on employee engagement. So it can be as simple as an email, maybe a post in an internal comms channel, and perhaps a memo to managers just to make sure they're continually reminding employees about this. It doesn't need to be an all singing and all dancing communications plan to really have an impact for employees. I also wanted to include some top tips in this presentation so that when you are looking at launching your next survey, it's a real success. The launch and prep for your survey is really key to getting high response rates, getting those insights, and really making sure as well that employees feel comfortable and confident sharing their opinion. And I don't want all of the planning that you put into launching pulse surveys to be wasted because of a bad launch. So I thought we would go through some of the best practice now to make sure that you are doing everything you can to make sure it's a success. So let me just grab a drink quickly. The first thing you can be looking at is reviewing previous survey launches. I love looking back and learning from the past. I think it's always going to create improvements for the future. If you haven't run a survey before, you can have a look at other internal employee projects you've launched as well, because there will always be something you can learn from them that will help you shape the way that you launch your pulse surveys. So I like to look at the wins that we had, the losses we had, and any opportunities we have to improve. And there are a few questions that I ask myself every time I look at a previous survey launch or project, just to make sure that I'm identifying those as thoroughly as possible. So the first one is, did employees understand the key messages we launched the survey with? The second is, did we reach the correct employee groups with all our communications? The next one is, were our communications accessible to all? Do employees find it easy to access the communications? Did our employees trust the communications? Was there anything about our communications that created confusion or surprise for employees? Did we make it clear where employees could send us questions if they had any? And this might be from a technical perspective, this might be from an anonymity perspective, or this might even just be from a like, what questions are going to be in the survey? I want a sneak peek. Did we use the right internal communications channels for the survey and the employees that we were trying to reach? And were our communications consistent across all of these channels? These questions are really, really important to ask yourselves each and every time you launch a survey. The answers may not change, but it's just really good practice to get into. And the reason for that is if there is ever any confusion or doubt in an employee's mind when you're launching a survey, they will not answer that survey. If they are worried about how to access it, if they're concerned about anonymity, if they see a piece of communication, perhaps on Slack or Teams, and it's ever so slightly different from what they read in an email, it will cause some doubt, it will cause some confusion, and it will make them suspicious of the survey. It's a difficult one to think about, but that is the kind of feelings that go on with surveys with some groups of employees. So we just want to make sure we're really tight on that. And these questions will help you do that. If you did want those questions sent to you afterwards, please just let me know, just ping me a message using the webinar chat, and I will make sure I send them through to you afterwards. The second thing we want to do is make sure we're mapping our communication channels. So even though we may have answered this in the previous question, did we manage to reach all of our employees? Did we use the appropriate communications channels? It's still really important to make sure we're mapping these correctly. So what I like to do is just create a table that outlines, of course, Christina, I'll make sure those are sent to you. What I want to do is create a table that outlines the channel and the purpose of those communications channels, and make it clear as well, if you are a larger team, who owns which channels. So this might be anything from email, internal messaging, your intranet, your any virtual training or presentations, and this might be for key groups, or this might be for all of your employees. So when we're talking about virtual training and presentations for key groups, especially when it comes to surveys, this will be anyone that you expect to receive a question about surveys that's maybe going to have to be that frontline support. So it might be technical queries about surveys. Perhaps they have an employee that can't work out how to use the survey system. That's okay. So that just gives those frontline staff the confidence and ability to answer those questions. But you also may want to consider doing a training or a presentation for all of your employees, just so they have that first visual run through of your survey software. It gives them the confidence to use it, and they understand how they can access this as well. It's always really useful to make sure that they have the option to do that, because it almost gives them the confidence ahead of answering the survey that they can answer it if they perhaps do have a lower digital literacy than folk that use their computers every day. Physical marketing materials can often be very overlooked in the digital world, especially as we're moving towards a more paperless environment. But the odd poster or leaflet, especially if you have colleagues that aren't at their desks every hour of the day, are very, very impactful. Like I said, videos as well, having a launch video, a training video, using social media to publicize it. Some employees may never open their emails, but will follow you on perhaps Instagram or LinkedIn. Team meetings and events and staff newsletters. So looking at all of these channels together and having and there will be more that I have not put in the list, and considering how you can really use them to maximize your survey launch. This will also help you explore the different groups of employees you're communicating with, the most effective ways to communicate with them, and the best owner for each of those channels. So the other thing to really consider here is how your senior leadership team, when we're talking about how we communicate that vision, how we bring our senior leaders into this, where they can contribute as well. So videos are a really great way of doing that. Social media as well, perhaps harnessing your senior leaders' own LinkedIn, so they can really kind of put their own personal reputation behind these surveys and are really showing the staff that they're living that listening culture. Okay. The next one is a really, really big one, just highlighting that it's a safe space to speak up. 74% of employees would be more inclined to speak up and share feedback about their company and culture if the channel that they're using is truly anonymous. Including a reminder in your launch communications that your survey is 100% anonymous, and that your employees are safe to express themselves is crucial. It will never be more upfront. It can never be too prominent in your communications, is what I'm trying to say. You can talk about this time and time again in your pre-launch communications, and it will always help. This will really give employees the confidence to share that detailed and honest feedback that you are looking for. Apologies, my cat has just jumped up on my desk, so she is joining in today and learning more. I'm working from home, so that's that. So yes, so highlighting anonymity, it's really going to help your employees feel confident to share detailed feedback and that honest feedback as well. And that's what you need to help create real change. You don't want an employee just jumping on, answering the question, just clicking through to get to the end, because all they've been communicated about is your response rate and how it's important for them to participate, but they don't have that confidence to participate with their true selves. These surveys are about cultivating a culture where employees are really given a voice and are heard, And as long as they're respectful, an employee should always feel safe expressing themselves, and giving them that anonymity, that anonymous channel is really, really key for that. It may be also that that is why you look to an external survey software provider, because perhaps using an internal system you already use, such as Microsoft Forms, Teams, Google Forms, it's not going to give them enough of that confidence that it's anonymous, because they can see that they already have a profile linked to it. So it's just something to consider when you're looking at that aspect. You also want to make sure that your survey is accessible for all. It can be really easy to create these amazing survey campaigns full of emails, Teams messages, perhaps you've got graphics, and then get really disappointed when your response rate doesn't reflect the effort that's been put in. We've talked already about deskless employees, perhaps employees that aren't spending all day at their desks. You need to consider these different audience groups to ensure that your survey does reach absolutely everyone. Including everyone means that the data you gather and act on will reflect the feedback of all, making it more likely that you will create a positive impact and reflect the needs of all employees in your changes. So again, when we're thinking about that employee engagement piece and all of the factors that contribute to it, there is an element of segmentation and personalization that needs to happen for it to be truly effective. And I don't mean going out and giving every single employee a different benefit or a different work from home policy. It's just thinking about those key groups that are really bringing your score down and how we best support those. We also want to make sure that we're gathering the views of folk that aren't confident to speak up using other channels. Surveys are here to help you draw out that feedback from those that typically stay quiet as well. So we really want to make sure we are reaching them. So I have, again, a set of questions that I will make sure you get afterwards. That help you just consider those employee groups and segments and how you can best reach them. So what does their day or week look like? So thinking about your teams or perhaps those groups of employees, what does their day or week look like? How do they currently feel about working at your organization? And I want the positives and the negatives for this one. What are the key messages they will engage with? To reach this segment, what are the best channels? And hopefully you've already done that table, so it'll be nice and easy for you to answer that one. What is the most likely channel they will use to engage with this particular survey? How do you need it shared to them? And what's in it for them? Why will they care about answering this survey? So once you have that information together, it's just about thinking about the communications channels that will best reach those colleagues and creating some key messages for them. Now, you need to be careful here because you need to think about that consistency as well. But there is a very simple way of making sure that messages are consistent, but we're also highlighting the right things for the different groups of employees that there are. Why did I include what does their day or week look like? If all of your emails and all of the team meetings that discuss surveys are on a Thursday afternoon and there's a group of folk that aren't in on a Thursday afternoon, they're never going to hear about this survey. That Thursday afternoon email will be buried in their inbox and they will have missed all of the meetings where they can gain that trust from their managers to really make sure that they are keen to answer the survey. So understanding what their day or their week looks like just means that when you're scheduling those communications, when you're looking at the meetings they can engage with, you're reaching everyone. Any questions on that one? Because I know it can be a new topic for some. I'm really happy to chat to you about it afterwards. So just feel free to add me on LinkedIn and we can have a conversation about that after this webinar. Another really key one is bringing your managers on board. Your managers are on the front line of this, and we really want to work with them to help them understand the value of employee engagement and to really motivate them to push your surveys and encourage employees to engage with the survey responses. Managers sometimes can be a little reticent to employee surveys. They can get worried about the responses and what's going to be said and how that reflects on them. So while surveying does tend to be led by HR teams, line managers are literally on the front line and we really want to work with them. So coaching them to understand the value of engagement and motivating employee responses. And this could be through daily interactions or one-on-one meetings. But working with them to build surveys as well creates that kind of cohesion between HR and management. So asking them what they need to know about their team, or perhaps working with you once the survey has closed, because they can really help give you additional context on the survey results as well, and they will be the ones that help you implement that change and solution. So the earlier you can bring them on board with this survey, the better. The final point is quite simple, but just remember to communicate timelines with everyone. It can be quite a simple one to forget about as well, because it is almost so obvious. Including timelines and deadlines in your communications, and this is to everyone, to your senior leaders, to your managers, to your team members and your colleagues, is so important to ensure that mostly response rates remain high. Everyone works to deadlines, and if they don't have that deadline and they're not clear on that, they're not going to have that moment in their brain to remember when to answer it by. If employees as well and the managers have a clear understanding of when they need to answer the survey by, it also makes them easier to manage their own time and their team's time. So perhaps managers will be motivated to put a little bit of time aside for their team to sit and answer the survey all in one go. It is genuinely amazing the difference just simply communicating the survey close date has on your overall response rate. So finally, just a few things to keep in mind when you are running your employee engagement surveys. Remember just not to focus just on the numbers, okay? Now this sounds kind of strange because that's mostly all that we're going to be getting in our reports, but the numbers will only get you so far. To capture the sentiment of your employees, you need to make sure that you're including opportunities for comment and free text within your surveys. Over the years, organizations have become really, really reliant on quantitative survey data and have really underutilized the qualitative data. The lessons that we learn about the data we're gathering in these surveys will always come from the stories employees tell us in those comments. Quantitative data will help you understand what your business's key areas for improvement are, but the qualitative data is what will help you learn the why behind them. When used together, they'll give you this amazing context that you need to build an amazing employee experience. But I do get it. Reading every single comment, especially if you're in a larger organization, is daunting and near impossible, especially for small HR teams. Many survey providers have it, but we do too. We actually have a few little magic tricks, such as sentiment analysis and key phrase extraction, that really help you capture all of the detail without having to go through every single comment. And that helps you uncover those insights that scoring your comments or perhaps theming them manually won't. So just something to consider is making sure you're including those comments and those opportunity for comment, but making sure you use software that really makes sure that you're not going to be spending hours and hours and hours elbow deep in spreadsheets. On your next employee engagement survey, remember just to don't ask any questions that you don't know how to fix or can't fix. Every employee survey question implies that you're going to take action based on the feedback. And if you break that promise, your employees may grow frustrated and it may have an adverse effect on your employee engagement. The best piece of advice I can give is when you're next deciding what questions to include in your survey, ask yourself, how would I fix a low score? In other words, what actionable insights will I get from this question to fix? All of the options you come up with can be viable, but don't be tempted to put in the fix before you ask the question. You don't know what exact issue is driving employee engagement down until you ask. And just because you're guessing, you may guess wrong, which means employees will either be met with silence or the wrong solution if you do then make that assumption. So once you have your data, it may have confirmed a couple of ideas, always go back with another survey or a prompt to employees just to double check that that is the right solution for them. Make sure you're repeating your surveys regularly too. This means you can not only monitor how your changes are progressing, but also it will surface anything that may be beginning to affect your employees, but is maybe not big enough for you to have noticed yet. This also contributes to the way that your employees feel listened to, which in turn contributes to your employee engagement. You do need to remember to pick the right cadence for your team, though, otherwise it can lead to survey fatigue, especially if you aren't closing the loop on your communications. Every organization is really different and benefits from a different survey schedule. Unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all rule for pulse surveys. I wish there was. It would be really easy for me to give you the solution here and there. But my best tip for this would be just to have a think about your own internal comms cycles and how the surveys best fit into those. Only 29% of companies say that all managers share their employee survey results with their workforce. That is tiny. Post-survey action needs to be consistent. Otherwise, it becomes a huge weakness for your organization. So to make sure that your surveys are really effective in the future, employees need to know that their comments have been taken on board, that you have listened to them, and you are taking action to implement changes. You can also say that you can't take action, but the key to that is explaining why. You need to make sure that if the change that you have deduced or the employees have suggested, if it's not right for your organization or not possible, it is okay to say that. You just need to make sure that you're really communicating that effectively. And please, please, please don't shy away from sharing the bad results and the good results. Employees really value honesty, and they really will return the gesture with their own feedback as well. So make sure you're honoring them with both. If you've got the right HR software or the right survey software, it's also possible to segment data by employee responses, which provides those even deeper insights that drives the performance in the areas that really need action. So I think we've talked a lot about this already in the kind of working from home context, that belonging context, and even that learning and development context. But it's really, really, really important when action planning too. Blanket changes for employees are sometimes not the best approach, particularly for some of the barriers we've explored earlier, especially things like resources to do the job and work-life balance as well. So yeah, just making sure that you're deep diving and really tailoring those communications and action planning. Bringing employees together to reflect on survey suggestions, issues, and resolutions is a really, really effective way to see continuous change from your surveys. By putting your people at the heart of action planning, they will feel really close to the cause and are more likely to support the change ongoing. It's also a really great opportunity to gather more feedback and refine the ideas you have for changes ahead of launching them. This is a really lovely opportunity as well to bring your senior leaders into it. So another lovely tick on that point too. This could be at any point in an employee's touch point with your organization. So it could be during one-to-ones with managers and employees. It could be team meetings. It could be town halls. It could be additional surveys. Maybe you have an anonymous employee messenger. At Stripe, we do have one in our software that's really, really useful for opportunities like this. It might even be a simple email. It's just really worth keeping in mind for your action planning moving forwards. And the final one, a big challenge for employee surveys is just managing those expectations and the follow-up of your employees and your stakeholders, and ensuring that the survey process is sustainable and impactful. Unrealistic expectations and follow-up can lead to disappointment, frustration, and resistance, and ultimately undermine the value and credibility of your survey, that survey that's just gone, and surveys moving forwards as well. It ultimately does more harm than good for your employee engagement. So to overcome this challenge, excuse me, you need to ensure that you set realistic and specific goals and timelines for your survey process and communicate them really clearly and consistently. So this includes things like, once the survey has closed, when can employees expect to hear about the survey results, about the follow-up action planning, and any future communications from that. You also need to be able to monitor and evaluate the progress and impact of your action plans, and celebrate and recognize the achievements and improvements that you've achieved as well. So make sure that you do have those processes planned out and in place so that you can do that really, really effectively. Finally, does anyone have any questions? I can't see any in the Q&A box, and I realize we've only got a couple of minutes left, but if there are any, feel free to pop them in now. If not, I will just, excuse me, I've lost my mouse. Move on to the thank you page, but if you are popping a question in the Q&A, I will hang around for a minute just to see it and answer it if needed. But thank you so much for attending today, everyone. It's been amazing to have you on. After this talk, I would love it if you could share your favorite insight and tag myself and Strab. We always really love seeing the little tidbits that you've picked up from these talks. It really does make our day. We will be sharing a recording of the talk for all. Feel free to share with any colleagues and friends that you think maybe my words have gone now. I've used too many. Please feel free to share with any colleagues that you think will find this useful. If you need anything else from me or the team, or have a quick question, need some advice, or on your pulse surveys, please feel free to get in touch. If there are no more questions, I will head off. But thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Christina, for your feedback. I hope you all have a really, really lovely afternoon, and I will see you all on the next webinar, which will be in the new year.